Hello, one and all.
Well, hello.
Hey, Tony, look at that with the haircut.
It's more like lack of a haircut, actually. It's gotten really long, so I just kind of get it out of my way.
Well, your curls look good, and this looks good too.
Oh, thanks.
And Ray's like sporting the cool background there too. Yeah. Yeah, you're fancy.
You missed out because I was in space a little while ago.
Oh.
Ray, you're always in space.
You've been talking to my wife again, haven't you?
So I was just exploring the city website so that I'm better at it. If I wanted to find like active like permits and plans for, I swear everybody's always asking me like, hey, what's going in there that they're clearing space for? Surely there's somewhere on the city website that kind of has that answer. Teach me, somebody.
The short answer, am I unmuted now? The short answer to that, for now, we're actually working on getting some more information communicated to the public on our website. But if you happen to go to the development services page, all the way at the bottom on the left side of the menu options, it says something like land use directory or project directory, something along those lines.
I see that. Current land use projects.
So
okay.
That's more for, planning, not necessarily building permits, but not as many people are going to ask about what building permits are in the works. But that does give a pretty good overview of all the projects that we have in process and where they're at in the process. It doesn't have a lot of detail. We don't have scanned in plans or anything like that, but it does. We've started at least providing the very basics, and we're kind of working on making that a lot more user-friendly and include a lot more robust information for people to get, especially because so many less people are going to come into the office to look at plans nowadays, and they're going to look more online. We used to just provide paper copies, so we're kind of working toward getting it all online. So if you look at that and you have any thoughts, I'd be really excited to hear any feedback you might have.
Okay, cool. Well, it's a start. That's definitely the direction that I was leaning. So now I can explore.
Yay, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The time is 6 p.m., December 8, 2020, and this is the City of Oak Harbor Planning Commission special meeting. Due to COVID-19, there will be no physical meeting location per Washington Proclamation 20-28. Meeting may be viewed live via YouTube or Channel 10. My understanding is that the live meeting, to listen to the live meeting, that phone number is temporarily not working. To leave a public comment that will be made part of the meeting record, please call and leave a message at 360-279-4512. Once again, that number is 360-279-4512. The first item on the agenda this evening is the roll call, and let the record show that all of the commissioners are present. Second item is a approval of the minutes, October 27, 2020, regular business meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the October 27, 2020 regular business meeting minutes as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Or not. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. This is the time we allow for public comment. Obviously, public comment has to be called in. So at this time, I'd also like to call on our Development Services Director, David Kuhl, who has a update for all of us, for the community at large, I'm sure. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. To follow up on the Commissioner question earlier, I'd like to just give you a rundown on a couple of projects that have been approved recently. There's one called the Barrington Drive Apartments, which you might have noticed as you've driven down Barrington just a few blocks from City Hall. It's a 20-unit apartment building that'll be started soon, and that just got approved recently, and so you'll see that going up quickly. Also, another one is the Howards Point Plat PRD. That's been approved for some time. What we're going to see soon is 4 model homes going up. We're working on a new model home process. As some of you may have been around the last few years when a model home ordinance was passed, and that model home ordinance is something we're using, all of us, for the first time. So we're trying to figure out how it works, and so we're putting together a model home permit process. Our attorney is working on it with us as well, so we don't miss any steps. What it does is we're putting in model homes before the final plat actually gets approved, but we want to condition those model homes to make sure that those go in and it doesn't cause problems before the final plat gets approved. So those are happening right now in town, and a number of other projects are happening, which you'll see very soon. I think next year you're going to see a lot more growth coming out of the ground. A couple long-range planning projects we're working on that I just want to give you a quick update on. We're going to be changing the ICC code, building code, updating our 2015 code to 2018. Those are updated every 3 years. And so this is the 3-year code cycle we're on right now. And we need to have those updated no later than February 1st, 2021. So you'll be seeing that very soon, right away in January. And then it goes to council to get that approved. So that update is done around the country. And so we're no different than anywhere else in the country. We'll need to get that approved quickly. Also, Ray Lindenberg's also working on the horizontal mixed use that you've seen, and he's also working with the City Council on that in study sessions, so that may come back fairly soon. The Harbor Heights planning is something we've been working on internally, and you may be seeing a survey or other things coming out in the public to show people and to get your opinion on what could be happening with that 75-acre park site out there. We're currently working on a land use change as well as a rezone that'll be happening next year. So those are just a couple of the long-range planning projects we're working on, as well as current planning projects. One of the planning commissioners, excuse me, suggested that I give you a quick update every time we meet, so just trying to help give you information on what we're working on. So thank you.
Thank you, David. The first item on the public meetings and hearings will be brought to us by Senior Planner Kat Kamak. It's the 2020 Comp Plan Amendments, and it is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing at the appropriate time. Kak?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members of the Commission. Kat Kamak, Senior Planner. My computer keeps saying unstable internet connection, so I'm going to stop my video, but I'm going to share my screen and just go with audio so that I don't cut out or anything. I'm going to share my screen for a short presentation. Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
hoping yes. Okay. Otherwise, I'm sure Ray can knock on my wall and let me know if I cut out. This is the 2020 Comprehensive Plan amendments, and as the director noted in some of his early statements, we're working on the Harbor Heights property, and the land use change is one of the comprehensive plan amendments that's being considered as part of this cycle. So the two, initially, when we started off this year on the docket, we had 4 items. Currently, we are considering the land use change and the capital improvements plan. The housing element plan and the JPA UGA discussion are still on the docket, but they will continue on to next year. You'll hear more about the housing action plan from Senior Planner Dennis Lefevre shortly, but that work is continuing on into 2021. So I'll go over the land use change and then go over the CIP, and then we can open up for questions and open up the hearing. So the land use change is for 75 acres that the city acquired. We're calling it the Harbor Heights property because was what on the land transaction. That was the company that they created to do that. I think the city's working on renaming that for a later time. However, the slide here shows the location of the property. It's on the north end of the city, and it is on the terminus of Gun Club Road. And you also have from the south, you have Elwar Road that comes and stops at the property. And here on the west side, you have the Red Wing development, and you have Kathleen Drive that doesn't quite touch the property, but it's really close to it. So this is currently designated in our land use map as industrial and business park, and it was zoned IBP. And the change to accommodate parks, as you can see, there are many blue squares here. Most of those are public facilities and parks. In order to have this as a city park, you want to get it to public facilities, and that's what this land use change is about. So the report provided for the Planning Commission addresses this land use change and all the criteria around it. This change is definitely supported by our plans, and the 2019 Parks Plan definitely identified this property as being able to serve the level of service areas that the park plan establishes. So if you see the green circles here, these are a mile radius for community parks from Volunteer, Windjammer, and Fort Nugent. But when you get it to the northwest part of the town, don't have any parks. And so the park plan identifies that as an area for service, and so this meets that need. And plus we have a lot of facility needs that we may have to replace, and generally our parks plan identifies more facilities. And environmental impacts are minimal or can be mitigated. The main things that you want to consider when making changes like this is when you pull a land use out of one category for another, you want to determine whether there's adequate land use remaining. And if I can go back a slide, as you can see, we do have a large area of land designated for industrial, and so there is a lot more potential still remaining without the 75 acres. Also the land use change that is being proposed is mostly compatible with some of the surrounding uses. As you can see, mostly it is residential in nature, except for the gun club, which most of its facilities could be buffered by the water tower. So the land use change could be considered compatible with surrounding uses. So that's the land use amendment that's in front of Planning Commission. And the other part of the 2020 amendment is the capital improvements plan. The capital improvements plan, this year's 6-year plan. Actually, before I jump into the capital improvements plan, maybe I should stop and ask if there are any questions, or do we want to coordinate a discussion on the land use right now, or shall I finish up the whole presentation and then we can have the question and answer? Any thoughts?
CAC, one of my questions is just a procedural question. This gets sent up the chain. We approve it, and then it gets to the next stop is City Council?
Yes. This is tonight you're holding a public hearing and making a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council will open a hearing on the 15th, which is their next council meeting, and then they will continue the hearing to January 5th and then take action there.
Okay, thank you.
CAC, this is Greg.
Yes.
So we're having a public hearing. I thought you could only do one public hearing on an issue. Is that?
Yes, that is correct. I was just opening up for discussions with the Planning Commission.
This is not going to be a public hearing then?
Oh, no, it is.
Oh, okay.
I will continue on my presentation, and I will and then we'll take questions. My apologies. Okay. So the other amendment for the comp plan is the capital improvements plan, and this is something that the city considers every year. We make minor amendments and adjustments. There are years that we have skipped the CIP amendment because they're either adopted with the budget or there's actually no changes. However, this year, it is in sync with the 2-year budget that the City Council is considering currently. So what's tracking in the CIP and what's tracking in the budget are pretty much identical. So the first 2 years of the CIP syncs with the city's 2-year budget. The city's budget actually has a 6-year time frame, so they do some forecasting and some planning, which really helps the capital improvements plan. And so that way, the budget, we can sync with the budget. It's consistent with regional plans. And just as a reminder, the capital improvements plan mostly tracks projects that are greater than $50,000. So there's a lot of other projects that the city does. However, if they're less than $50,000, then they're just tracked in the budget. It's not in the capital improvements plan. So these are most of the updates that we do to the capital improvements plan. We have sections in the capital improvements plan categorizing projects. We have streets, parks, wastewater, water, storm. So these are all tables that are updated as part of the capital improvements plan, and this is provided in the document along with the report. I can just touch on some of the highlights of this without spending too much time, and we can come back if you have any questions. As in the streets project, and this is usually pretty a popular section because a lot of people are interested in knowing what street needs to be is coming up for improvement. So we have many, like Northeast 7th Avenue, we have some movement in 2021. We're doing engineering, and with the hope of construction in 2024. We have the active transportation plan that's coming up. We have a grant. For that from the RTPO. We have, we're in the works of hiring some consultants to help us determine what kind of improvements we need to do along the shoreline on Pioneer Way. So we'll have some consultant work done to guide us in those improvements. So these are some of the projects that are captured in the streets fund. Our parks. Of course, we have the Windjammer Phase 2 that's being planned for 21-22. We have the Harbor Heights, and as you can see, that's going to be a long-term project. You got to accumulate funds. It's a 75 acres. Fort Nugent took 20 years to accomplish, so this will take somewhat similar timelines, maybe faster, hopefully. And then some playgrounds and other improvements to existing parks. And then we will also invest in some of the 7th Avenue wetlands. These are projects that have been tracking in the last few years. These are not new projects. These are mostly ones that have been tracking in the last 6 years. So the 7th Avenue wetlands is kind of scheduled to time with the 7th Avenue project to see if there's any potential to extend trails there. So just on format wise, on these tables, on the top you have the expenditures, the cost of the project, and the bottom you have the different revenue sources that contribute towards each of these projects. So just as an FYI. I have the tables for wastewater, water, and storm. I won't go into those in detail. If anybody has questions, we can come back to these and address these. But the criteria for the comprehensive plan amendments have been addressed in the packet. And I just have captured just the criteria here. The details are in the packet. The amendments are consistent with other goals and policies in the comprehensive plan. There's no violations of any Growth Management Act or any countywide planning policies, and any of the changes we're making. SEPA has been addressed, at least at the land use level, and this is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. From a process standpoint, how did we get here? These amendments take a year long. Just wanted to kind of show the path that we took to get here. We've started the 2022 amendments, and so for these amendments, we started in 2019. The docket was approved in March of this year, and so we worked through this. And this is a COVID pandemic year. And so some things got delayed, but we still were able to keep track, did our SEPA determinations in September, October, and here we are in the Planning Commission hearing with City Council action. And then we'll start the process for the next cycle next year. So the recommended action is to request that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing, take public testimony, and make a recommendation to the City Council. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, CAC. Commissioners, do we have any questions, comments?
Yeah, just a couple of things. You did say that there is still substantial land in the industrial zoned areas, and I'm sure you've done your homework and all that kind of good stuff, but you really feel as if we've got plenty of industrial land for the future?
I think so. I mean, at least from the past experience in terms of the kind of industrial or the business parks that were envisioned when they first did the Growth Management Act didn't pan out in terms of location, amenities, and things like that. And I think that's how those business parks and planned industrial parks were created, because that was one of the big things that back, I think, in the 80s and the 90s, land uses were looking for those type of uses. However, that really didn't pan out here. And I think the property owners tried best to recruit or try and find uses to take that land, and for a long time it did sit vacant without much demand. So I think that's kind of what you kind of base on the type of industry that would be supported, and whether the land is there to support it. I think this won't impact that.
Okay, good. The other has to do with safety, or at least perceived safety. It is right next to a gun club on that northeast corner. I haven't ever been over there myself. I've never looked at it. I know I can hear it from my house sometimes. It's an outdoor range, correct?
That's correct.
And not for me necessarily, but a family is going to feel good about having their kids out there playing and listening to gunfire. I'm just being devil's advocate. I'm just wondering if we've thought about that or looked at the safety. You know, we've gone through the checklist. Gun club next door, not on the checklist.
Yeah. I think there were some discussion. We have the 5 acres of the water tower land that's actually right adjacent to the gun club, and I can share the aerial photograph real quick just to show you what's out there. The thing about these Zoom or Ring Central meetings is you can share resources on the go. So this is the property. This is Gun Club Road, and here's the 5 acres, and here is their range, and it's away from the park. I mean, you get residential properties here more so that you would think could potentially have impacts than the property that's over here. So from a technical standpoint, I think it's safe. From a hearing gunfire, from a psychological standpoint, it's very different. And you hope that that's not something that impacts people too much.
Okay, and I just wanted to address. You guys did a survey, notice to the folks that live around the place, and you received some feedback back from some of the surrounding neighbors. But these folks in suburban hills, they're speaking that on this property right now, there's been problems with homelessness and drugs and drug deals, and people getting their cars broken into and petty theft. And I think their concerns are real that that the problem could be exacerbated. I don't know. My question to you is, has this discussion come up from a safety standpoint for the neighbors around the area, and whether or not we're going to actually fence it, or is there any plan for that, CAC?
Yeah, so as part of our land use change and part of our public comment process, there was a survey that was actually sent out to the surrounding property owners. A postcard was sent, and we got some comments back, and I think it's included in the Planning Commission packet at the very end. Emails that were received, and I think that's what you mentioned, that they're complaining about people that may have used the property in that way. So there's, I think, a couple things that, and it's valid concerns, and these have been discussed. And there's a couple things. One is, I think there was a lot of issues previously because it was in private ownership, and it was very different. So now that it's in the city ownership, now there's little different ways that we can tackle the issue. So by trying to include this as a park use, I think this will slowly start to alleviate some of those issues because there'll be more people, more traffic, more eyes coming to the park. Now, in terms of fencing, those are things that will come up with design concepts and things like that when we get into the implementation of the park. And I think that will be something that will be definitely considered. Because if you look at other parks that we have, for example, Fort Nugent Park, there is a chain link fence all the way around it. And I think there'll be something similar here in order to provide that privacy or that buffer, so to speak, between the neighbors and the park, and to control the access into the park. So those are the factors definitely that will be considered in the design. And it also comes down to, funding and what happens first and what phasing and all of that.
Good. Yeah, well, and with the city taking it over, you would expect it to become more safe, and that would be a good thing. But again, making these folks comfortable with a plan for security would go a long way with them. All right. Thank you, Kat. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question. At this point, is the access to the park, is the plan for that to just funnel in more from just the gun club from that road? There wouldn't be any impact off of Yates Road or the county, kind of those lots there. I had a question on that, if I'm understanding.
Yes. We are exploring in developing the park. There are, like, as I mentioned, there's potential access off of Gun Club, there's access off of this from the south through Elwha, Kathleen Drive. And I think all of those are in play in terms of designing the park. No, all of them are in consideration. We don't know what impacts will push decisions one way or the other yet. We're currently just looking at it from a land use change standpoint, and then look at it from a rezoning standpoint. And by then, hopefully, we will have site plans and conceptual plans trying to outline what this park will have and what needs to be done. So, but everything is in consideration. Gun Club Road, how far is it improved? Currently, where it's gated, it's a county road. It's not a city road. So there's many complexities to it, and we're exploring all options to see what would be the best moving forward.
Blaine, you had a comment?
Yeah, I had a comment real quick, Kat. As a father and as a gun owner, I mean, if we're looking at it this way, as Tony said about, having a park next to a gun range, I enjoy shooting firearms just like anybody else. But at the same time, I don't think I would take my kids next to a park that is not at a gun range. I think we can probably design or find a better place to put a park instead of up there right next to a gun range. The gun club has been there for decades, I do believe, right? Are we not going to wind up chasing them out of their park or out of their club? Have we talked to the gun range at all about this?
They, everybody has around the park has been notified of the land use change. So we would hear any comments, I would think, if they were opposed to something like this occurring adjacent to their property. I think it's a recreational facility as well, I think, as well as the park will have many recreational facilities. And so I think they are similar in that way, but I do understand the noise impacts. So we'll take that point definitely moving forward.
Yeah. Has anyone specifically approached the gun club and asked them about this? Because this is going to be right on their doorstep. And have we talked to them specifically about it at all?
I personally haven't talked to the gun club. I don't know if anybody else, Blaine, do you know if we had any contact with the gun club?
Well, they submitted issues regarding when we did the planning process, and we did do the vetting when the council was looking at buying this property here. There is other parks that are next to gun clubs, and so we just don't see there's an issue. It shoots the other way, and so the council didn't feel that was an issue and went ahead and purchased that property knowing that it would be next to the gun club. But certainly that was vetted, and talking to people who travel around the region, I can't remember which one, there's at least one in this area that people go to readily that's next to a gun club, and it does just fine.
Any other comments, questions? Eric?
I have one. Thank you. I just one comment on Zach's comment. As we met as youth sports organizations, I'm president of the Oak Harbor Youth Football League, and we all talked about the purchase of the property prior to, and we're all in favor of that property acquisition and using that as a sports facility. My question for CAC was, it looks like we're going to spend $481 in 2022 on SR20 and Fakima Boyer property access road. Is that a road that we're purchasing or one that we're putting in?
Good question. I don't know the detail. That brings up a very interesting resource that I wanted to point to the Planning Commission as part of this year's capital improvements plan. We have in the packet, in the appendix, some spreadsheets from the budget and some project. And so I am going to go to one of to try and answer the question on that to see what exactly, and Blaine, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, Fakima is owned by the property that the road would be on has already been designed, and we already already own it. So it'd be on city right away that we're putting the road to help another business that's coming in for access that can't get access off of SR20. And we've already put in for 0.09 county economic redevelopment money. We got turned down last time, but I think we have sufficient funding. And if you look at the project, I think, are you pulling it up? You can pull up that particular project and it could bring up the funding CAC. I think he's got it right now. Yeah, it's using city-owned property right now for the future road, and then it would be to help the U-Haul and businesses to the south there that can't get off of SR20 anymore. So it'd give them a alternate route.
And when we say alternate route, am I picturing like a frontage road?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what it's a back way in, and he just was flagging the area. It's that property down. He was flagging it there where it's going in. Not where the yellow is, but over it straight down there. CAC, you were flagging it there. Yeah, there. It comes down there, and I think we can. It's already been designed. We had maps of it already. It's designed before I even came here, so it's been in the plans for 3 or 4 years to put it in. So.
And this is to help a for-profit business, is that right?
It's to give them access that they can't have access up at SR20 anymore.
I don't know if you've ever been on trying to pull off of Fakima Road. SR20 is just so busy that it's rough for any. I mean, even just normal life off of there.
Are you guys seeing the aerial photo?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the access here, just because of the speeding lanes and the combination of these lanes coming together, making this access really difficult. So properties are here to provide them an opportunity to go up all of this. An access road here is it's mostly a safety issue and protecting that Highway 20 corridor here from really conflicting movements and making it dangerous.
Thank you.
So does the business have any financial responsibility as part of that?
Pardon me, I didn't catch the question, I'm sorry.
Does the business have any financial responsibility as a part of that? Or
I don't think businesses are contributing at this time to that road. It'll be a public road.
Yeah, we can have Public Works here or get some more answers from that, the Public Works Director and City Engineer could, much more qualified than me and CAC talking to that issue. So they certainly know a lot about it.
Any other comments, concerns, questions? So at this time, CAC, it's time to open the public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I am going to open a public hearing on this matter. Sarah, have we received any? No comments or any communication from the general public. So I guess we need to close the public hearing then. Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the 2020 comp plan amendments and send it on up the chain.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a second. I'll ask for the question. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. You get that, Sarah? The motion passes. We'll go on now to the next item on our agenda this evening. This will also be CAC Camac Senior Planner, the 2021 Comp Plan Docket, and this is a public meeting. CAC?
My internet connection seems to be slow, so there's a lot of freezing and so on. So forgive me if I'm a little slow. All right. Just a short presentation. I hope you can see my slides. So as I was mentioning, with the end of 1 year's amendments, we start the next year cycle. And if you're wondering why we do this annual cycle, just as a reminder, the GMA allows for cities to amend their we establish this process so that the collect all the amendments and process them. So without a process like this, it could be random, or you could potentially not have a very good fixed schedule in which you can consider these. So that's why we have this lengthy process, and we start with public input all the way starting from in October. This is something that we do every year. We advertise to the public, have it on our website, asking for any amendments to the comprehensive plan. Normally, we get land use changes, just like how we had Harbor Heights land use. Other city property submit for land use changes. We had one recently along 3rd Street that went from R2 to, or from lower density to medium density. So these kind of changes usually come through. However, we changed our land use plan in 2016, and that has reduced the number of applications we get. So for this year, we have not received any sponsored applications, no land use applications. We have a deadline of December 1st. We advertise it all through October and November. Not received any land use change amendments. So what's tracking to the 2021 docket is the housing element and the housing action plan that be a connection between these two moving forward. The housing action plan can establish some groundwork for the JPA, UGA discussions with the county. And then we have some grant money from RTPO to do an active transportation plan. Be similar to the housing action plan, it would be a subset of the transportation element. And so that would be considered as a comprehensive plan amendment as well. So these are the items that are tracking in the 21 docket, my error. So the timeline for this is that we'll have a hearing on this. This is just a meeting just to discuss what's going in 2021. But the Planning Commission will hold a hearing on this docket on the 26th, which is the first month. Hearing at the City Council in March, and then we'll process all these amendments through the moving forward. So just a short presentation to get things started for 2021. Happy to answer questions, comments, thoughts. And no action needed for information and for discussion purposes.
Kat, can you clarify maybe with some examples of how that housing action plan would work into the docket of, like you said, it might affect like the JPA, something like that. Can you give me an example so I can wrap my head around it?
Yes. So the housing action plan will is going to consider the housing need.
You cut out
what
there.
we need. Am I not coming across?
Occasional patchiness. So just, I heard we'll consider the housing need.
Sorry. The housing action plan will look at absorb that capacity. And so that could potentially lay the groundwork for us to talk to the county if we are to discuss any UGA or JPA.
Okay, I think I'm getting from via the internet breakups that the housing action plan is the essentially the data that then gets discussed, which might potentially affect, of course, it could affect anything, land use, densities, etc., that then could also possibly involve the county. Is that a correct understanding?
I wouldn't say it is the data, but it is one data set that contributes towards that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, well, thank you, CAC. Now we'll go on to item C on the agenda. Associate Planner Ray Lindenberg will take us horizontal mixed-use discussion, and this is also a public meeting. Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm going to do a pretty brief presentation tonight, just an introduction to the concept and what we can do with horizontal mixed use, where we can do it. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my presentation here. I'll go through that, and then we can have a little discussion when I'm done here. So horizontal mixed use. We've we kind of view this as a continuation, excuse me, of the work that we've been working on with the Central Business District and some of the changes, consolidation, cleaning up of the commercial zone districts that we're going to be going through in the next month to a year, or months to a year probably. But this is kind of the key components of that. The horizontal mixed use is something that has been going through kind of the process here that we've been working on. And so this is something that has been in the back of my mind since we started with the Central Business District. So what we have is right now we allow for mixed use, but it's only in a vertical configuration. Essentially, you have to do your mixed uses within the same building. We allow for that in the Central Business District and other commercial zone districts. As you might know, our zoning code allows for uses between the zoning districts. So if it's allowed in the C1 or the CBD, it's probably allowed in the C3 and the C5 zone districts. So we have kind of an interrelated interconnectedness between those commercial zone districts. So what we have is a situation where we allow the vertical mixed use in many of our commercial zone districts. So this diagram kind of gives you an idea of what the concept is. You have your commercial uses in red there on the bottom floor, and then your residential uses above. And that is the limitation. You have to do it in the same building. And that is why we're looking at the possibility of doing horizontal mixed use, is because this is kind of limited to as far as how you can develop a property. And so some of the effects of the vertical orientation is it emphasizes the commercial development. Essentially, you can't do mixed use without doing commercial development because it's on the ground floor. There's no way to float some residential uses in the air, so you have to do that commercial development first. It provides a traditional downtown appearance, and that's why it's one of the preferred ways of doing development in the CBD and then following into the other zone districts. It creates a very pedestrian-oriented environment because of the way that it appears. You know, you have that typical downtown environment, so it makes it very pedestrian-friendly. It can limit development potential for certain properties. If you have properties that are larger or narrow and deep, it can limit the potential of those properties. And it may limit development based on what the commercial real estate market can absorb. We kind of discussed that with the Central Business District that if we require a certain percentage of commercial use, that might limit the availability or the ability of somebody to develop their property because the commercial real estate market may not be able to absorb, X number of thousands of square feet or a large development at this time. The horizontal mixed use. So we take a look at what that really means, and that's separating out those residential uses from the commercial uses. It's still on the same parcel, but it's not necessarily in the same building. The commercial and residential uses can occupy the same site or would be required to occupy the same site, but they don't have to be in the same building. And the result or the effect of that is to provide balance to the development. The residential or commercial uses could be built first. This doesn't lock you into having to do commercial development first. What you might be able to do on a larger parcel is to build, say, 50 or 25 or however many residential units that might drive some of the need for the commercial use. So the residential use might come first in this case. That allows for greater flexibility for some parcels. It produces more suburban type appearance perhaps that might be more automobile oriented because you have the separate buildings. In practice, that's kind of what it does is we have more of a suburban type appearance, but at the same time there are ways that we can ensure that the pedestrian amenities are still there and the aesthetic quality is still there as well. So you might be asking, why the change now? Why do we need to be looking at horizontal mixed use after we made changes to the code? Is there really a need for this? And that's part of my second portion of this presentation is to discuss steps going forward. So specifically, we have interest from 2 developers on 2 separate parcels. And then we have potential interest from a real estate agent who is looking at potential projects that could be developed on a parcel in the city. The specifics there that we have is a project that's up on Goldie that's been kind of talked about for quite some time. You can see the date on there is September 24th of 2019. And then another one that's a more recent discussion for a project, potential project on Atlas Street, which is just down south of the Home Depot there. I put together a map showing potential locations here. I wasn't super specific about it because, to be perfectly honest, I'm not trying to kind of pinpoint these at this point. This is a general discussion, but you can get a good idea of where we're talking about with those. The 2 north ones, we have the one up here on Goldie Street, and then we also have the one down here at Atlas. And then the third one that I was referring to is a property that's currently up for sale. And as I mentioned, the real estate agent wants to know what it is that they could do with that parcel if it was sold. So the common elements that you might see here from this map are, number one, that's in the C3 zone district, and that's pretty important for future considerations. Second is that it's off highway. They're not located directly on the highway. And then the third thing is there's the desire for the residential component. That really stems from the idea that these developers are really looking for primarily a residential project rather than primarily a commercial project. So some of the potential benefits of allowing for horizontal mixed use. As I mentioned previously, it can provide balance to development. It allows that residential use to come first, and then have the commercial come second or as it's needed, or just as a second phase of a property or a project. It allows for that greater flexibility. It would increase the residential capacity within the urban growth area for the city, because we would be converting essentially commercial land use to residential land use, at least partially. It could help reduce traffic if we do have that mixed use on one property. People would be able to go to a restaurant or a store on their own parcel there, thereby reducing the amount of traffic in the city. And then it might help assist some of the urban infill that we're looking at. The state has mandated that we develop within our existing urban growth area as much as possible, and this is one way to do that. Now, there are some negatives. This isn't all sunshine and puppy dogs. The reduction in commercial land capacity is a danger there. We want to make sure that we have enough commercial land capacity. It's a difficult balance. One of the concepts brought up by the specific letter that we got requesting that we look at horizontal mixed use is what's been termed as the retail apocalypse. And we've all heard of that, that people are switching over to ordering things online and purchasing things virtually. And, we've seen situations in the city where we have large tenants who leave, and then it's difficult to fill those spaces. We just had another large tenant leave recently, the Office Max, and hopefully we'll be able to get that space filled quickly. But recent experience with the Kmart store indicates that might be kind of difficult. So that's one of those things that we have to consider, is that balance of what's available and what's being taken up by new businesses. And then the second thing is it might create a de facto rezone if we allow residential parcel or residential project to be built, and that commercial portion of the horizontal mixed use never gets built. Then we end up with a situation where it's just residential and we've taken up an entire commercially zoned property with residential. That's not what we want. So that's something we have to figure out how we can tie the two together to require that commercial be built, so we don't end up in that situation. And then the third one, conflicts between neighboring parcels when those uses weren't considered. We have buffer areas and we have, conditions that we use to make sure that uses are compatible with each other. If we start putting residential uses in where commercial uses were assumed to be, we might have situations where there might be incompatibility. So that's something we need to consider as well. Now, we've done some research as to other communities that we can use as a model and other zoning codes. There's no such thing as new zoning quite often, is that we take a lot from other places that have already been tested, already work. And so I just got 5 municipalities here in Washington State that have modeled a horizontal mixed use that could work well for us and fit into our code fairly easily. Gig Harbor, Mukilteo, Port Townsend, Snoqualmie, and Tumwater are examples, and there will be other examples nationwide that we'll continue to research and take a look at to see what is the best fit for Oak Harbor. So possibilities for code integration. Allowing horizontal mixed use only in certain zone districts while maintaining the vertical mixed use as it is now. And this is probably the direction that we would go, is to allow for horizontal mixed use in maybe a couple of different zone districts. I have C3 listed on there and possibly RO as well. The residential office district is found, it was intended to be a buffer between more intense commercial uses and residential uses, and so this could be a good way of doing that. If you have a parcel that has a narrow frontage and is fairly deep, you could have that commercial use on the front portion of the parcel with the residential on the back, and that would actually provide that buffering within the parcel itself. So that could be really useful in that situation. Standards and requirements for horizontal mixed use. What we're going to do as far as what parcels are going to be eligible to do horizontal mixed use, if there's any frontage requirements like a minimum frontage along a street or locations, landscaping that could be used to mitigate any concerns with regard to neighboring properties, or even the different category, the different components of the horizontal mixed use itself, of the project itself, and then standards to mitigate possible half-finished projects. I've seen situations before where the residential portion gets built and then you end up with tumbleweeds blowing around in the commercial portion for years afterwards because nothing happens. And so we need to be able to mitigate that, whether it's through landscaping requirements or other mitigation. We need to figure out how we can do that, and then being able to protect that commercial land inventory as well. And just as an aside here, we did get public comment on that. And this is from the potential developer of that Atlas Street property. I'll go ahead and read that off to you because I know it's difficult to read. What it says is, we may not be in attendance, however, we could be listening to the meeting. If it works out, I will do so. We are doing some planning design on a 3-acre tract that's zoned C3 at the southeast corner of 8th and Atlas Street. When this zone was conceived, lower floor commercial with residential above was commonplace. Safety issues and online commercial sales have seriously changed the trends. In our design, we have a commercial space and parking garage units, miscellaneous offices for management and storage spaces, small repair sites, and flexible uses with the lifestyle and service needs of the residential tenants. We hope that you will consider this adaptive design as a means of most productively using this property near our city center. Best wishes, Joel Douglas. So we did get some public comment on that. And like I said, I can get you the information, the 2 letters that we got from the potential developers as we move forward with this process. So our next steps, pretty much what we're doing here is we're presenting this to you to determine if there is interest in moving forward with potential horizontal mixed use to be allowed in limited zone districts within the city. And so we're making presentations to the Planning Commission and the City Council. We're determining interest in changes. Next step after that, if there is interest, is we'll continue our research and start drafting language to make those changes. And then we'll present the conceptual language to the Planning Commission and City Council, work on public outreach at the same time, and then come up with a draft ordinance. And of course, like I said, this is all dependent on if this is a direction that the Planning Commission and City Council are interested in going. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and then open it up to discussion if anybody has any questions.
Great. I have a number of questions. Why don't we, it's a C3 that's targeted, right? The three that you mentioned are all zone C3.
That is correct.
So my question is, if in fact we deem that we do not need this for commercial use, or as much commercial use as the land would allow now, why wouldn't we just rezone it residential? Why are we hanging on to both sides of this in a parcel? Is it for the developers? Is it a better plan than like I said earlier, just developing it for residential?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think it ultimately comes down to the flexibility to allow for residential development while still maintaining an inventory of commercially zoned land. The one in particular on Goldie Street is a large parcel, and to change that from a commercial zone to a residential zone takes out a significant amount of acreage from our inventory of commercially zoned property. And even if we end up with a very small commercial development along the frontage there, it is still at least an amount of commercial that kind of maintains that inventory, if you will. There is a possibility that we could go to rezone a parcel like that. I think the thing is about it, even if we went that direction, I think having the option to do horizontal mixed use is still a good idea, because the parcel that I referred to, the third parcel that's up for sale right now, would be an ideal candidate for doing horizontal mixed use, because it's still kind of in that urban downtown area, but not entirely applicable for having an upstairs and downstairs type situation. It's more along the lines of having, a brew pub or, something that's kind of visitor oriented up closer to the street, while you have condos with a view of the park and the water towards the back. So I think that having a vertical mixed use has its place, and that place is downtown for sure. And if somebody can make that work in a different location, that's great too. What we found is a lot of your kind of typical commercial development, like we've seen at Whidbey Island Place, where the grocery outlet and the mod pizza and everything is going in. If we required that to be a vertical mixed use, that project probably wouldn't happen, because typically when you have kind of national chains and tenants along those lines, they're not looking to have residents above them who are going to complain about noise and odors and things like that. So just the way the market works, I think it makes a lot more sense to allow for this flexibility.
Any other comments from, Blaine? Blaine?
Yeah, just to kind of add, make sure I get this right. Ray, to go from a property from commercial to residential is a comprehensive plan change, isn't it, typically?
That is correct, typically, and in this case, it definitely would be. If we're going from a C3, it's definitely a comprehensive plan change, and so that adds months to the process as well. And not to say, that we're not going to be working on this for quite a while, but again, I think it's about that flexibility within the code.
Yeah, and the general thing on economic development, in this state, we don't have tax incremental financing like other states have, so having flexibility on and having a friendly zoning as much as possible is one of the tools we have available for us for driving economic development.
Ray, yeah, you know me, I love affordable housing as much as the next guy or more, but I gotta tell you, that makes me really nervous. I mean, I understand the concept. Again, how do you mitigate people who build residential first and then never quite get around to building commercial? I think what I would like to see to make me feel more comfortable are examples of where it works, because in my head, it doesn't work at all. So if I could see some examples of some place where it was, that it worked out well, I think that would absolutely make me feel a lot better about it.
Sure, we can definitely do that.
Amy?
Yeah, I've got a question right here. Kind of along the same lines of Tony of, I love the thought of more residential, but of course you guys have mentioned the commercial inventory and, you know, having all the residential right next to. So if we're looking like we're trying to create just the zonings for it to go either way. If one of these developers, we say horizontal mixed use is something that we're okay with. Say on this Goldie project, we see 4 residential buildings and some little commercial spot towards the frontage area. That's great, and it works out for, say, 50 years, and then Whidbey Island is different in 50 years. For whatever reason, in theory, does that parcel, if it's horizontal mixed use, have the ability to swing the other direction of course, it's like cost of redoing those buildings, et cetera, but in theory, it can swing back the other direction of, hey, we want to make this more of a commercial space now. The town's changed. That still works within that theoretical horizontal mixed use?
I mean, sure. The thing is about that, if it were developed as horizontal mixed use and we have certain requirements that they have, 1 or 2 commercial buildings along the frontage and there's 3 or 4, like you said, in the back that are residential, and the underlying zoning is commercial, then if it were a situation where we have a spike in demand for commercially zoned properties and somebody wants to go in and redevelop that back portion, I think that's something that we would look at from the standpoint of, it's a commercially zoned parcel, and they have requested, kind of a special dispensation, if you will, to do the residential. So in order to go the other direction towards more commercial, I think would be something that would work out. If it was going the other direction so that it was all residential, then you would need to look at a greater level of review, whether that is meaning that we're going to change the zone completely to allow for residential and it comes into compliance with a residential zone district, then that's something we would do. I mean, that would be something we would do with a house on a single family zone district. Things change and we understand that. So, definitely it would be flexible from the outset of development now, if you will, and it would be flexible, but in a different way later on. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, commissioners? Well, for now, Ray, I guess that takes care of that. I'm sure we'll be hearing more down the road here.
Definitely. I look forward to talking to you about it more.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Next item on the agenda this evening is brought to us by Senior Planner Dennis Lefevre. Shoreline Master Plan, a draft, and this is a public meeting. Dennis?
That is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the commission, can you all hear me okay? Good. Okay. I know at the October meeting when I discussed our SMP update, I was indicating that I'd have a draft in your hands as a Christmas present, but unfortunately, that is not going to happen this time, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we are still working with our consultants, Coastal Geologic Services, to prepare that analysis on our residential bluff designation along Scenic Heights, to make sure that our policies and regulations in both the Shoreline Master Program and our development regulations in our municipal code address the stability and the bluff issues that have been raised as far as stormwater runoff and the complexities of that ecological function along the bluff. We haven't gotten that report yet, but I've been in contact with our consultants, and I have a call on Friday to indicate that he had some final questions on that report, so we should be getting that very soon. That, of course, will be potentially integral into our SMP update as far as maybe revising some policies or regulations to reflect the findings of that report. The second piece that I wanted to discuss with you tonight is, and I've kind of bounced on this subject before, but it's a discussion on sea level rise. I've been thinking about this for a couple of months on how to address this in our Shoreline Master Program. And I have a proposal that I'd like to bounce off of you and get your reaction. For one thing, we have no mention of any kind of climate change issues, specifically sea level rise, addressed in our 2013 Master Program. And there is no specific requirement in the Shoreline Management Act or through the Shoreline Master Program guidelines prepared by the Department of Ecology to address sea level rise in our SMP. But putting some thought onto this subject, I think it would be remiss if we didn't address it to some degree in this edition of our Shoreline Master Program. So I did some snooping around in other communities and other jurisdictions, their master programs, to see how they address it. And it really is quite a range. Certainly communities like the city of Olympia have done real specific reports and studies on sea level rise simply because of their geographic alignment to the bay in that community, to basically not even addressing it at all. So looking at some of the data that is available to create some type of either policy or regulation guidance for our plan update, there's a tremendous amount of data, as you might expect, on this subject being created specifically at the University of Washington. But the problem is there's so many different parameters and variables that can go into defining where our sea level rise may be in X amount of years. It's really a moving, flexible target. So what my suggestion is that we create a policy, and by the way, this is consistent with Jefferson County and Islands County's policy as far as addressing sea level rise as having some potential impacts to redevelopment or new development in our shoreline jurisdictions that should be at least addressed as part of a project approval based on whatever the best available science may be at that time of development. And we as staff would review that and then make sure that whatever that science shows for the potential sea level rise in that specific area is addressed in that redevelopment or development project. I think at this point in time, that's probably the safest way to address this issue in our update process. It can be a real political hotcake to try to pin down regulations to a specific sea level rise level in 15 years. I don't really want to go there at this point in time. So I discussed this with the administration earlier, and this seems like the best approach to at least address it in our update, but not be too specific as to our regulations on sea level rise. At this point, I'd welcome any feedback on that suggestion by our commissions, and see if that might be a sound approach to at least include some draft language in our initial draft so you can take a look at it. Any thoughts on that?
If I'm comprehending this right, you're saying let's throw in some language for, redevelopment or these particular affected areas, that it says, hey, we, the city, have to at least check this issue within your process.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
It would be based upon, wherever that project may be, we would require that they incorporate however sea level rise may impact the long-term viability of that development project.
Okay.
And then mitigate for that.
Right. And then the debate would be, how specific do you make them be, right? That's something that would be discussed within the draft language?
Well, I don't know if we'd want to go quite that far because there's so many different variables that we would have to address. Not to mention the issues of whether the range is correct, the time frame is correct, the existing stability of our shoreline, whether there's man-made or natural issues involved. There's just too many variables to try to pin that down in regulation. It would be more of a policy guidance at this point in time.
Guidance for them. Got it.
Yes.
And Dennis, is this something that you would require a developer or a development to do costly studies and that sort of thing? Is that where we're going?
Well, I think there's enough information that there wouldn't be a need to do a costly study for an individual project. I think there's enough studies and models out there that could give us some parameters as to how sea level rise may impact the development. The University of Washington has a wonderful model that is applicable to our area, but it depends on where along our shoreline that development would occur, would be influenced by varying sea level rise amounts.
It's just my personal opinion, but unless the state of Washington makes us do that, I don't really have any interest in even bringing it up. Erosion, that's a big problem, but I don't know about sea level rise.
Well, those two are actually related. If you think about it, if there's an increase in the sea level rise or the level of our water table, I mean, that could increase erosion.
Any other comments, commissioners? Direction, suggestions?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, what I would like to do then is at least put some draft language into the report and present that to the commission early next year. I'm anticipating January for the draft report to be somewhat, well, I would imagine that would be ready. And then we can address that specifically then. If that language doesn't sit well with the commissioners, and we can act to revise accordingly or remove, depending on direction from you folks.
Dennis, is there a time frame on this with the state or the federal government?
The entire effort has to be done by June of 2021. And in fact, the next piece of topic that I wanted to discuss was the attachment that I included, and that's a checklist or a worksheet from the Department of Ecology of the pieces that we need to pull together to present to them as a package for our periodic review. Several of those things we're on track with, so we're doing okay, but I just wanted to present it to you so you have a general set of information on what we are preparing for DOE review. But we do have time, January, if I present the draft report for sufficient time to discuss.
Hey, Dennis, I was curious, can we table this until February when you have like a bigger packet or something, like a rough draft that we can understand a little bit better what you're looking at?
I didn't catch the first part of that, Zach. If you could repeat, please.
Well, I caught the last part of what you said about January. So basically, like table this idea until January. You're saying, or February?
Yeah, my idea was to put some kind of draft language in there and then just review it in January once you get the whole draft report.
Yeah.
And see if it fits, see if it doesn't, see how we might want to change it.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Any further
Does
comment?
that sound good?
Yep. I think we have sort of a consensus, Dennis.
Okay.
Well, while I have you here, we have another item that I believe you're going to walk us through here. The Housing Action Plan?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. There is another topic here, and this is a brief update on our Housing Action Plan. We are making progress on this plan. One of the major milestones that we have accomplished is preparing a draft of the Housing Needs Assessment. That was included as part of your packet. We also have it online too as part of our website that we've developed for this Housing Action Plan. And as I mentioned in the past, this Housing Needs Assessment basically gives us a snapshot of where we are with our current demographics, our economic and housing statistics, and it will give us a basis to identify what some of the current and potential gaps in our housing market is. Those next steps, of course, will be to work closely with our consultants to strategize on how to fill those gaps, whether it be a lack of a certain housing type, or lack of a certain housing type in income group, affordable housing, and then and then prepare those strategies and recommendations to either amend our comp plan policies, as CAC mentioned, or look at our development regulations and see where there may be some barriers in our development regulations to provide those gap fixes, so to speak. So that is upcoming. I don't know if you have any questions specifically on the Housing Needs Assessment. There's one thing I would like to address as part of that assessment, and that's basically the last section is on the land capacity analysis. Once we got the draft of that, the assessment as a whole, staff reviewed it and had several issues with the map and the analysis that was done as part of this draft that you have. So we sent back those revisions to our consultants, and at this point, we have not received back a revised land capacity analysis. So just be aware when you do look at the Housing Needs Assessment, that last section is under review and revisement at this point in time. So the next steps, actually we had the second stakeholders meeting. We have a stakeholders advisory committee formed to help us along and kind of give us some input from their perspectives. We had that in late October. And the draft of the Housing Action Plan with the strategies will be prepared and should be ready for review by staff, again, early part of next year. We're looking at January. So then, again, we'll bounce that draft report off of our stakeholders group and then present it to Planning Commission and take it through the process of approval. The other thing that I'd like to make note of too is the substantive work that was done by the Affordable Housing Task Force a couple years ago in 2018, came up with several recommendations to assist both the city and the county in providing affordable housing. Those are all going to be taken into account and blended into this Housing Action Plan. So that piece of work that was done will be included in this effort. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have on this effort. Again, this effort is scheduled to be concluded by June of next year.
Dennis, I appreciate you guys taking a look at their report and going in and doing your own investigating and determining what is real vacant usable land and what is not, which is really important. So their findings also came with a caveat that said, we didn't look at all these properties in depth and make sure that they are actual, that they would actually work and is actually space for people to build more houses. So appreciate you guys' work on that, and that's super important. Otherwise, it's just not good data.
That's how staff felt as well, that it was an important piece that we needed to really analyze and review and make sure it was accurate as possible. Yes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis, for all your hard work there. Any other comments from the commissioners this evening? Anything for the good of the record? Or we have reached the end of our agenda. I'd like to announce that our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on January 26, 2021. It's hard to believe that the year 2020 is about to end. I can't say as I regret that a whole lot. We need to get onward and upward. With that, folks, I call the meeting adjourned.